It's a newspaper called La Nación, The Nation. And in their one of their issues in January of 1986, they really made a big boo-boo. They made a mistake. They interviewed a guy who was a spokesman for Israeli mountain trekkers, and they were all a bunch of young guys saying, yeah, we are Israeli officers. When we finish our military service in Israel, the government sends us up to different parts, especially Argentina, so that we can survey other areas of the world in order to think where we can have Jewish settlements for the future. And we've seen southern Argentina, and it's got everything. It's got food, it's got potable water, it's got great land, so we can set up settlements here. There would be absolutely no problem, and we're working on that. And it became almost something which was very much commented upon. Actually, their spokesman was a guy by the name of Robert Levi. So these things are permanently happening. They are literally swamping the country. And I know of a case that was referred to me by a very close friend of mine, that he was in one of our cities down in Patagonia, which is a beautiful tourist area. And he said, I was in a hotel and there was about 25 young kids. They looked in their 20s and maybe their 30s. They looked like hippies. They had all these backpacks and so forth. And all of a sudden, a guy comes in who also looks like a hippie, but he was older than them. He comes in with a car, he receives them, and when the guy comes in, they all stand up and they gave him a military salute. And then the guy said, okay, at ease, and they just kept carrying on. They were speaking in English and in Hebrew and so forth. But you can tell that you literally have young Israeli officers and military personnel going throughout all of Patagonia. Now, naturally, they're not going to go in their Israeli uniforms. They're not stupid. They're doing it, merging in with the people as though they were just, tourists and hippies hunting around the beautiful mountain areas and lake areas in southern Argentina.
Now, that's interesting. These little settlements. I have been reporting on the New World Order since I witnessed what happened in Waco. I mean, I was outraged. I was living in Florida and doing pretty well in Florida, watching the Today Show and reading the Miami Herald and thinking I was informed. And when I saw what happened at Waco, I swore I would never sit back and watch something like that happen again. And one of the answers, I mean, after reporting on this, as you've been doing for 20 years here, I came up with a way. How do you combat this? How do we combat this? And in a way, you take it right out of the page, just what you mentioned about. I came up with the idea of Liberty Villages, where you've got groups of Americans that are loyal to the Constitution, and opening that up to our veterans who have been attacked, spit on, killed. If they didn't get killed in combat by a manufactured enemy, then we sprayed them with Agent Orange or here, use this depleted uranium ammo. It won't hurt you for a few years, but you won't return to the United States as a well-trained, healthy vet. You'll return as a sick vet. And immediately, after I came up with the idea for this Liberty Village, suddenly I was under attack. There was an attempt on my life. I thought it was about 9/11. I thought it was because I exposed 9/11 and referred to that on the air as an exaggerated case of Jewish lightning. But I don't think it was that. I think they're afraid of starting an American kibbutz, an American village, and especially they don't want us growing our own fuel, creating our own fuel, and eating good, healthy food where you don't get sick from the food you're eating.
Well, right, Clayton. That I think is in a nutshell one of the many things that they are trying to do. First of all, whilst the Soviet Union wanted you to behave in a certain way, and they would impose it on you through coercion and their police state and so forth, they pretty much allow you to think whatever you wanted to think. As long as they got your behavior pattern, they didn't give a damn whether you liked the regime or you didn't like the regime. This time it's much, much worse, because the powers that be don't only want you to behave in a certain way, they want you to think in a certain way. It's like that old, very good George Orwell novel, 1984, where the state forces Wilson, he's the victim in the whole novel, to think that 2 and 2 is 5. Not only does he have to say it, they actually make him think and believe that 2 plus 2 is 5, and that he would abandon the concept, the common sense concept, that 2 plus 2 is 4. So here we do have a very similar stance. They are dead scared of anybody who will think with his own or her own mind, and that is probably the worst crime that you can possibly do, to start thinking with your mind, not accepting the official story regarding whether it be 9/11, whether it be Waco, even the Second World War, whether it be the Vietnam War, the USS Liberty, and so forth. They will not accept anybody having a politically incorrect view. That's why they will come up and automatically brand you an anti-Semite. They will brand you a terrorist. They will brand you a hate monger, as you were saying at the beginning of the program, or they will even call you, well, a conspiracy theorist. And these are all irrational terms, completely irrational terms. But as long as most people fall for them, that will be enough. And in a way, I can understand that happening more in America than it happens in Argentina, because there is a factor that we have to keep in mind, and I'll briefly mention it to you. Except for maybe the last decade or decade and a half, for the most part, if you're an American, like you were born in America, you lived there, I imagine, most of your adult life.
Yes.
Your government has been doing things more or less okay, in the sense that you got into the Second World War, you won the Second World War, you became a superpower. Anybody who wanted to challenge you, whoever it was, ended up standing down. The Soviet Union stood down in 1990, and they just went into the dustbin of history. So an American can say, look, I might like my government more, I might like my government less, but more or less, we've become a superpower. We've become the indispensable nation, as Madeleine Albright used to say. Argentina, for example, is that story exactly the other way around. Our governments have done as big a foul up and as big a mess and committed so many mistakes that in principle any Argentine citizen will not believe anything the government says. If the government is saying, independent of their political ideology, if the government says they're going to do this or they're going to do that for this or that reason, they're probably lying. So we've grown accustomed to not believing in our own government, in our own authorities. So we're not shocked. Now, let me give you an example. I'm 58 years old, and in my adult life, I've lived through 3 massive economical financial meltdowns. In 1975, which wasn't really that bad, but it was quite shocking. In 1989, we had hyperinflation, and everybody just about lost everything. You have to live through it. And in 2001, 2002, we went through a systemic banking and financial collapse, where the banking system was allowed to keep all our money, and we had in 1 week 5 presidents, because it was such a social crisis that we had rioting in the streets. It was one big mess. And now we know that, probably in a couple of years' time we're going to have another one. God knows what the characteristics will be this time, but we will have one. So we've grown accustomed not to believe, not to trust government. You guys, however, are accustomed. You're used to believing your government. You're used to believing the official story. You're used to believing in the magic bullet that killed JFK. And most Americans, and this is very sad, actually believe what I call the most ridiculous conspiracy theory of all time, that 19 Arabs who could hardly fly small aircraft were able to hijack 4 commercial jetliners, ram them into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, completely bypassing 16 intelligence agencies, both civilian and military, bypassing the American airspace security, and with plastic knives. I forgot that. And they were all led by a nut hiding in a cave in Afghanistan that you never found, and you're not even looking for him anymore. I mean, this is the most ridiculous conspiracy theory story that anybody can possibly imagine, but that's the official history, and most Americans will tend to believe in that.
Adrian, I'm laughing because I did an interview about 4 years ago, and they asked me, they said, well, they say that you're a conspiracy theorist, Clay. What's your favorite conspiracy theory? I said, that's George Bush's conspiracy theory that beats anything I could have come up with. That he wants you to believe that, somebody sitting in a cave in Afghanistan made the U.S. Air Force stand down.
Besides, Clayton, look at this. They call conspiracy theory. I think this is something very important for your audience and for all of us to keep in mind. They call conspiracy theory what is basically normal, common sense human behavior. If 4, 5, or 6 people have common interests, and they have common objectives. For example, they run a company, an industry. It is more than natural